Many times, a crane must be assembled before it is used. Cranes must not be assembled or used unless ground conditions are firm, drained, and sufficiently graded to meet the crane manufacturer's specifications. At times, a crane will need to have pads placed under the crane to provide additional support. Assembly and disassembly of a crane must be directed by a person who is competent and qualified, or by a competent person who is assisted by at least one qualified person. When assembling or disassembling a crane, employers must follow the manufacturer's guidelines and comply with the manufacturer's procedures applicable to assembly and disassembly, or have procedures in place for assembly and disassembly. Crane operators and crew members can be electrocuted when working near power lines. Always consider all power lines as energized and dangerous. During the assembly, disassembly, and operation of cranes, if any part of the crane, boom, load line, or load could get closer than 20 feet to a power line, certain steps must be taken to ensure the safety of all workers. Before any work begins near power lines, determine the line's voltage and the minimum clearance distance permitted under Table A in 29 CFR 1926.1408. If the line voltage is over 1,000 kilovolts, a registered engineer must determine appropriate distances. When it comes to power lines and cranes, be extra cautious. Consult and follow OSHA regulations and never take any chances with your safety. There are a variety of inspections which are required to ensure the crane is in safe operating condition. All cranes require an inspection at the beginning of each shift. Monthly inspections as well as an annual inspection are also required. Additional inspections are required depending on the circumstances and the type of crane in use. Shift inspection. A competent person must visually inspect the equipment each shift the equipment is used. Taking apart equipment components and booming down is generally not required as part of this inspection. A few of the items which must be inspected include control and drive mechanisms, hooks and latches, wire rope reeving, wire rope, tires, ground conditions around the equipment, and safety devices and operational aids for proper operation. Additional items must also be inspected. Consult OSHA standards for the complete list. If the inspector finds any deficiency in an item, they must determine if the deficiency is serious enough to be a safety hazard. If it is, the crane must not be used until the deficiency is corrected or repaired. Shift inspections do not have to be documented. Monthly inspection. The monthly inspection is the same as a shift inspection for most cranes, but additional items are included depending upon the crane type. The monthly inspection must be documented and maintained for a minimum of 3 months by the employer who conducts the inspection. Annual comprehensive inspection. An annual inspection must be conducted by a qualified person. The annual is far more thorough than a shift or monthly inspection. Disassembly of the crane may be necessary to complete the inspection. In addition to those items that must be checked during a shift inspection, OSHA requires a number of other items which must be inspected. These additional items can be located in the OSHA Regulation 29 CFR 1926.1412F. The annual inspection must be documented, maintained, and retained for a minimum of 12 months by the employer who conducts the inspection. If any deficiency is found which would constitute a safety hazard, the crane must be taken out of service until the deficiency is corrected. If the inspector determines that, though not presently a safety hazard, the deficiency needs to be monitored, the employer must ensure the deficiency is checked in the monthly inspections. Check with your employer as additional inspections may be required. All cranes are required to have certain safety equipment. This safety equipment is divided into two types: safety devices and operational aids. Both types must be checked during every shift inspection. Let's discuss safety devices first. All safety devices must be in proper working order for the crane to be operated. If an inspection shows a safety device is not working properly, the crane should not be used. If a safety device should stop functioning during operations, the operator must safely stop operations. Only after the device is repaired and inspected can the crane be put back into service. Some of the safety devices generally required for most cranes include crane level indicator, boom stop, jib stop, locks on foot pedal brakes, integral holding device, check valve on hydraulic outrigger jacks and hydraulic stabilizer jacks, rail clamps and rail stops for equipment on rails except for portal cranes, and a horn. Operational aids assist the operator by providing information about a crane function or by automatically taking control of the function. If an operational aid is not working properly, the equipment may still be operated for a limited time as long as certain alternative precautions are taken. OSHA identifies two categories of operational aids. Category 1 aids must be corrected within 7 days of a deficiency, and Category 2 aids have to be repaired within 30 days of discovery of the deficiency. Category 1 aids include boom hoist limiting device, luffing jib limiting device, and anti-two-block device. Category 2 aids include boom angle or radius indicator, luffing jib angle indicator, boom length indicator for a telescopic boom, and load weighing and similar devices. Employers must ensure crane operators are competent to operate the crane safely. If an employee does not have the required knowledge or ability to operate the crane safely, training must be provided prior to operating the crane. Employers must evaluate each operator to confirm the employee understands the information provided in the training. Crane operators must comply with all manufacturer or employer procedures applicable to the operation of the crane. Operators must not engage in any activity that diverts their attention while operating the crane. As a general rule, operators should never leave the controls while the load is suspended. Manufacturers' operating procedures or companies' operating procedures must be readily available in the cab at all times. Operators must know where the manuals are and how to read them and interpret the limits of the crane they are operating. One of the most dangerous hazards of operating a crane is overloading the rated capacity and causing the crane to collapse or tip over. Rated capacity is defined as the maximum working load permitted by the manufacturer under specified working conditions. The rated capacity of the crane will be listed on a load chart, which must be displayed on the crane. Never operate a crane in excess of its load as indicated on the load chart. The load limit is related to the weight and the angle of the boom. Always check the load chart and determine the weight of the load before using the crane. It is always recommended to rope off the area of the crane's swing radius to keep other workers from working or walking too close to the crane while in operation. An operator should always do an inspection of the crane before operating it. The inspection, which is different than the shift inspection, should include a verification that all controls are in the proper starting position and all personnel in the area clear before starting the crane. The operator should check each control to ensure it works properly and causes the crane to react as it should. This includes all directional controls. The operator should also test the upper limit switch without a load by lifting the hook block until it trips. Test the lower limit switch. Test the emergency stop switch. Inspect the wire rope for defects. Inspect the hook and safety latch. Hooks must not have cracks, have throat openings more than 15% of its original size or be twisted more than 10% off a vertical. Traveling with a load is prohibited if the practice is prohibited by the manufacturer. If it is not prohibited, operators must take precautions to prevent hazardous movement of the load and avoid excessive movement of the load that could overload the crane. Center the hook over the load and slowly lift straight up. Raise the load a few inches. Hold. Verify the capacity and balance and test brake system before delivering load. Be sure to avoid sudden stops and jerks. Lift the load just high enough to clear any obstacles in the pathway. Use hoisting routes that minimize the exposure of employees to hoisted loads where available. Never move loads over workers. Move the load slowly, always keeping your eye on it and paying attention to the crane's gauges. Use a tagline on the load to control rotational movement as it is moved and set. Never pull or drag a load sideways. Land and secure the load as soon as possible. A suspended load should never be left unattended. After setting the load, remove slings and hoisting materials and accessories. Return these items to the proper storage area. The hoist block should be lifted high enough to allow pedestrians and vehicles to pass safely. The emergency stop switch should be put in the off position. Whenever there is a concern about safety, the operator has the authority to stop and refuse to handle loads until a qualified person has determined that safety has been assured. Just like a police officer must sometimes direct traffic, a signal person helps direct the crane and the load. This assistance helps an operator operate the crane safely. A signal person is required in some situations. During operations requiring signals, the ability to transmit signals between the operator and signal person must be maintained. If that ability is interrupted at any time, the operator must safely stop operations until signal transmission is re-established and a proper signal is given and understood. Only one person may give signals to a crane at a time. The only exception is that any person may give an emergency stop signal. OSHA allows the use of different types of signals. Hand, voice, and audible are the three most common types. The type of signals used and means of transmitting the signals to the operator, such as direct line of sight, video, radio, etc., must be appropriate for the site conditions. All directions given to the operator by the signal person must be given from the operator's perspective. Each signal person must be qualified by either a third-party evaluator or through the employer's qualified evaluator. Documentation showing they are qualified must be available at the site while the signal person is employed by the employer. Only qualified persons with respect to the equipment and maintenance or repair tasks performed are allowed to work on cranes. Some repair or maintenance tasks may require maintenance personnel to operate the crane. Such personnel are not required to be qualified or certified as long as the operation is limited to those functions necessary to perform maintenance, inspect the equipment, or verify its performance. The maintenance personnel either must operate the equipment under direct supervision of an operator who is qualified, or be familiar with operation, limitations, characteristics, and hazards associated with the type of crane they are maintaining. If repair or maintenance work is going to be done at a height of 6 feet or more, the use of fall protection is required. There are other situations where fall protection is required for workers besides just maintenance and repair employees. Consult the OSHA regulations for additional details.